Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this asparagus production presentation. As you notice in the title, it does say Rio Grande Valley, and throughout this workshop, that'll probably be relevant why we put Rio Grande Valley. We'll get started. When starting your asparagus plot, one of the most important things is to get the best results is to start with a weed-free plot. One of the things that asparagus does not like is growing beside weeds. It's not good for the plant. When you pick out your plot, asparagus likes full sun, at least 8 hours of sunlight. Now, asparagus will tolerate some partial shade, but if you find an area where you can have full sun, that's even better. The soil conditions. Asparagus needs loose and fertile soil that drains well. Soil needs to be full of nutrients from the start. This means plenty of compost, which improves soil's fertility and structure. One of the things that I've done is I've used a 5-gallon bucket of compost to every 5 square feet of planting space, and that would be a good start. The soil pH is very important also. Asparagus thrives in a neutral to slightly acidic soil with a pH of about 6.5. If you're not sure of what soil acidity you have or what type of fertilizers you're going to apply, I recommend having your soil tested. We're going to start off by showing you the anatomy of an asparagus plant. As I'm talking through these things, that way you'll be able to follow through on some of the things that I'll be discussing. We'll start with the crown. The crown is the actual root system of the asparagus plant. It's also referred to as the roots of the plant. From the crown itself, you have the spear. The spear eventually, if it's not cut, will turn into the fern. But the spear is the actual part from the crown that comes out that we eat. If the spear is not harvested, then it eventually turns into what the plant is called a fern. Okay, it takes a few weeks for the actual spear to develop into a fern. Once the fern is developed, then you have your flowers that come out of the plant. Okay, the flowers eventually turn into these green berries, and eventually the green berries mature, they turn red, and those are your actual seeds of the plant. And in this particular picture, this particular fern right here is a female plant, and only the female plant actually puts out seeds. Asparagus is a perennial. It can be grown from seeds, or it can be grown from crowns. But of the two, I prefer growing them from crowns. It's far better and an easier choice. I mean, you can avoid an entire year of battling with weeds when planting by seeds. It's well worth the extra expense by planting the crowns. When planting by seed, it takes about 3 years to develop into a plant to harvest stage. When transplanting a 2 or 3 year old crown, you're actually able to harvest the following year or that following season. There are several varieties of asparagus out there that you can grow. We have the Mary Washington, which is the crown that I actually planted here at my farm. We have the Jersey Giant, we have the Jersey King, the Jersey Knight, and the Purple Passion. There are some other varieties that have been developed so that they can grow in a warmer climate as we have here in Zone 9. The advantage to that is, of course, that we don't, the place that they're grown in, or the area, shall I say, does not freeze. One of the reasons that also here that you'll see or you'll notice that the plants aren't very deep. They're only 6 to 8 inches deep. And that's one of the reasons that, once again, in our zone, our soil does not freeze. Any other place up country, they're planted a little bit deeper, and that's because the ground freezes, and of course it would eventually freeze the crown or the root itself. Now the asparagus can be grown in several different methods. It can be grown in containers. It can be grown in raised beds of all different shapes and sizes. It can be grown in ground. The only thing that you need to take into consideration when growing in containers is the fertilization of the actual area that you have planted your crown. As you're watering in a container and the water's flowing through the container, you're actually washing away some of the fertilizers and the amendments. So you have to replenish those constantly, okay? Here on this slide, the crowns were put in raised beds. These were 2 feet by 2 feet square. There was a 2 by 8 lumber that was used. And when you plant, you can plant in the early, or transplant, shall I say, you can plant in the early spring or in the late fall. In this particular spot here, you're also going to notice that there's 2 crowns. And the reason for that is that these crowns weren't very big in size. In planting, you normally plant a crown every 12 inches, a good sized crown every 12 inches. When I saw these, they were a little bit kind of small, so I went ahead and put 2 in this particular space. The other thing that I might mention is the crowns or roots that were being developed or are developed and are available to grow in our area, which is Zone 9, is the Apollo and the UC 157. In this particular slide, the actual crown was pretty big. So I just put 1 crown into this 2 feet by 2 feet area. And of course, I only went 6 to 8 inches deep. When you do plant your crowns, you want to cover your crowns with compost and topsoil. And I do recommend a good mixture would be 50% compost and 50% good topsoil. Make sure that the soil is not compacted, that it's fairly loose. This way the spears won't have any problems pushing through the soil. That container on the left is probably what I would recommend, that if you're going to plant in containers, because I guess the main reason is, and it'll be mentioned later in this discussion, that the asparagus plants last a very, very long time, up to 20 years. So you want something that is nice and big, and it will allow your root system to grow out. One of the things that you do have to consider is the type of irrigation that you are going to use. One thing that you have to remember and I need to point out is asparagus roots, they do not like to have wet feet. They do not like to be in standing water. So once again, make sure you have good drainage. If you don't, it literally rots the roots of your asparagus plants. The different methods to irrigate asparagus, you can use a drip irrigation system. It provides a more accurate placement of water and a reliable control of how much water is applied to that area. An equivalency of 1 inch of rain water per week is adequate for the first and second year growth. After that, you're looking maybe at 1 inch of water every week. And you know, you might say, well, how much is an inch of water per week? One of the things that I use also in this drip irrigation system is a water meter. And I literally know exactly how much water is going to each and every plant per square foot at every time. If you're watering 1 inch of water, I believe equals to a gallon of water per square foot. So you can decide whether you want to put that gallon of water slowly one day or over a week's period. This is just a close-up of the drip irrigation setup. And in this particular case, we have the drip tube tape. We have our manifold. We have our supply tube, and we have our water supply manifold going to this raised bed. Once you have your asparagus in the ground and they've been planted and they've been watered, your first spears will appear after a few weeks. When planting 2 to 3 year old crowns, the spears will appear after a few weeks. Now, if you're in the second year of growing asparagus and you harvest or you cut your ferns, your spears will appear just a few days after cutting those ferns at ground level. And here in the Rio Grande Valley, we're very fortunate to have 2 seasons. You're going to have a season in the spring, and you're going to have a season in the fall. Here's a close-up of the spears, the way they're going to look when they first come out of the ground. Once the spears pop out, they grow very, very fast. If conditions are right, they can grow up to 6 inches in 24 hours. From this point forward, you will have spears sprouting at different times of the day and night. So this is why you will have spears at different heights. And this is also the reason you have to harvest twice a day, once early in the morning and once late in the afternoon. One of the things that we're always asked is why 2 times a day, and why early in the morning and late in the afternoon. It's the spears are fresh when you cut early in the morning, and if you don't harvest in the morning and you wait till the afternoon, that 8-inch spear will literally turn into a 10-inch or 11-inch by the afternoon. And it will also start to put out some little leaves. And it also loses some of the taste. So it's best to cut it at that particular height. For the first 2 years, harvest will last approximately 3 to 4 weeks. After the third year, the beds should be in full production, so harvest season will last a little bit longer. Here you will notice the different heights and stages of the asparagus growing in this raised bed. Harvesting the spears. There's several different methods to harvest the spears. If you're doing an acre or so, the method is going to be slightly different that I show here. But if it's small acreage, you have a few raised beds, you have a few rows, I recommend using a pair of scissors or maybe a knife or some pruning hand shears. And once you harvest your first actual harvest, you won't need a measuring tape to be measuring how tall each one is. Basically, you'll be cutting all the taller ones. And what I like to use as a height control is my actual shears. My shears are actually 8 inches tall. So if I'm in question, I just put the shears right beside the asparagus, and if it's even close, I'll cut it. As I mentioned earlier, you want to cut them 8 to 10 inches. Any more than 10 inches is a little bit tall. The other thing is that you have to harvest, or the best tasting ones are anywhere between 1/2 inch to 3/4 in diameter. You will have some thinner ones that are coming out while these are being producing at the same time. What we do is we cut all the thinner ones because they're not going to get big and fat like that one. So we just take those out right away. And I have a picture here in just a little bit. That way it doesn't take any energy away from the crown itself. Here we show some of the spears that have been harvested. As I mentioned earlier, you can use knives, shears. When you have big acreage in the bigger places, what they do is they just go in and they're literally snapping the spear with their fingers, so the harvest can go pretty fast. When you're using shears and scissors, it goes pretty slow, but you get a very pretty cut if you use those tools. The storing the asparagus. After you cut, you need to brush off all the visible dirt. Very important. If you want, you can give the spears a light wash with cold water. But if you do wash them, you have to dry them thoroughly, because that moisture, if it doesn't come off, it can lead to mold. One of the things that we like to do is we store the spears in a glass filled with about 1 inch of water. And then we cover the glass with a Ziploc bag, and we place it in the refrigerator. This method, actually the spears last almost a week, and they're still very, very tasty. But the best time to eat them is either the same day, the next day, maybe 3 or 4 days later. One of the things that we have at our place is we stock 48 of these glasses, and each glass contains or can hold up to 1 pound of asparagus. And we use either on the single glass, a small plastic bag. But basically what we do is we will get 2 glasses together, and we'll get the bigger size Ziploc bag and cover them. That way we can store them a lot easier. here's what I was talking about a while ago as far as not harvesting the thinner ones. If you noticed on the other picture, the actual spears were the same thickness of this pencil or a little bit bigger in diameter. But after a few weeks of harvesting, all you're going to do is start getting some of these thinner ones. That means your season is over. Okay. Now, these taste good, they're edible, but it takes a whole bunch of them to make a pound, and they're sometimes a little bit stringier than the other ones. So this is actually what determines what, you know, your end of the season. When you don't cut these spears, these spears, after a few weeks, will start to turn into ferns, okay? These ferns will actually grow up to 3, 4, 5 feet tall. At this stage, the actual weeding slows down quite a bit because that bed literally closes up with all the ferns and everything. But up to this point, it's very, very important to have a real good weeding program. I mean, you like to see no weeds whatsoever on your plots. That way, when you're at this stage and you can't go in and weed anymore, it'll last literally the entire season without you having to go in and bother the plants as far as weeding is concerned. You allow the ferns to grow to maturity. This replenishes the nutrients for the next year's spear production. Your roots, your crown is actually growing during this period. And as I mentioned earlier, if very well taken care of and you're adding your nutrients back into your soil, these asparagus plant can be productive up to 20 years. At our place, our plants are already 7 years old. As I mentioned earlier, the female plants are the only ones that produce berries. Now, you really can't tell that it's a female plant till it gets into the fern stage, when it gets into the flowering production. So the gentleman that I bought the berries from, he literally told me what you want to do is you go in and you want to take out all your female plants and have nothing but male plants so you can have a higher production of asparagus. But I haven't done it. It's hard to go in there and dig them out and get rid of them. Now they do produce asparagus, don't get me wrong, but they're just not as productive as the male plant. And here, this one has the green berries, and eventually they'll turn red, and those become seeds. Now, at our place, we have a lot of mockingbirds. So at this point in time, we have actually wild asparagus growing all over the place. The birds come and eat the seeds, and they scatter them throughout our farm. So they're just everywhere in there. If you plant it in the spring, again in actually early fall, you're going to be ready for another crop. You basically cut the ferns at ground level, and your cycle literally begins all over again. Here in the Rio Grande Valley, we're very fortunate with our climate. We're able to cut our ferns in late February, early March, and have a 1 month, month and a half, sometimes 2 months season. And then we let our ferns grow up, and then come September, early September, we cut them again. And we actually, at this point, we're harvesting asparagus for almost a month and a half also on both the spring and the fall season. Uh, from November 2014 through August 27 for the organic cultivation of asparagus were conducted at a cooperator farm located near Lyford, Texas, and that's where I live. 5 different cultivars of asparagus were planted in 5 different replications at the cooperator's field in February of 2013. Each replication contains 5 plants of each cultivar. The asparagus was grown under organic conditions and continuously since planted. I was part of this program, and we were actually doing the harvesting, my coworker and I. And we have some graphs. We have some line graphs and we have some bar graphs that I'm going to show you here in a little bit. And sometimes the bar graphs and line graphs are a little confusing. I'm going to read what it says over to the left, and then I'm going to explain literally what these bar graphs and the line graphs mean here in just a little bit. The 5 cultivars of asparagus were examined to determine which performed better under South Texas weather conditions. The 5 cultivars of asparagus planted in February of 2013 included 2 Jersey types, the Jersey Knight and the Jersey Supreme, 1 Washington, which was the Mary Washington, and the 2 California types, which were actually for our zone, the Purple Passion and the UC 157. And it was to determine the better performing cultivars. The number of weight, the number of spears were documented, and the spears were cut when they were, at this experiment, we did it when they were 6 inches or higher. I'll explain the graph here in just a little bit. On year 1 performance of the 5 different asparagus cultivars in the Rio Grande Valley, the cultivars from the highest to the lowest performing based on the total number of spears. Jersey Supreme came in first, then UC 157, then Mary Washington, the Jersey Knight, and then the Purple Passion. On year 2, the performance was Jersey Supreme, Jersey Knight, Mary Washington, UC 157, and Purple Passion. I'll explain the results of these 2 line graphs. Okay, basically on year 1 and 2, Jersey Supreme produced the most spears. Okay, on year 1 and 2, UC 157 and Jersey Knight came in second. Now, Mary Washington on both years, year 1 and year 2, came in third. And on year 4, on year 1 and 2, the 4th one was Jersey Knight and UC 157. On year 1 and 2, Purple Passion came in 5th. Basically what it is says that Jersey Supreme on year 1 and 2 didn't change. It came in first. Mary Washington on year 1 and 2 came in third. And Purple Passion on year 1 and 2 came in 5th as far as spear production is concerned. The ones that flipped and flopped on year 1 and 2 was the UC 157 and the Jersey Knight. Okay, on year 2, now we're talking about total pounds for each of the asparagus cultivars shown below. From the highest performing, it was Jersey Supreme, 20 pounds. Then came in Jersey Knight, then Mary Washington, and then Purple Passion, and then UC 157. The total number of spears produced by each asparagus during the year 2, as I explained, on Jersey Knight and Mary Washington and UC 157 and Purple Passion a little bit earlier. This production was over a 16-month period for each asparagus cultivar, had a total planting of 25 linear feet, projecting the total annual production per acre of each cultivar requires that production is determined for a 12-month period, and a 25 linear feet of planting projected is at 8,736 feet. Now, assuming that the asparagus rows were spaced 5 feet apart, the ranking of asparagus cultivars for this production in pounds per acre based on a 2-year performance, this is what it means, that if we had had an acre of these cultivars, the Jersey Supreme would have produced 5,268 pounds. Jersey Night would have produced 4,980 pounds. And Mary Washington would have produced 4,115 pounds. Purple Passion, 3,355. And UC 157, 2,228. Now, on the graphs, you might notice that as far as spear production, one was different than the other. Now, the reason for that was that even though one had more spears, the spears weren't as big or as heavy as the other ones. So just because you had more spears, that didn't mean that you had more weight. So then in that case, we went by total weight. Okay, so in that case, if you were to rank them in production in pounds, Jersey Supreme, of course, would come in first, then Jersey Night, then Mary Washington, then Purple Passion, and then UC 157. Thank you. I know this was kind of fast, but we're limited on time. At this point, we're going to open it up to questions. If anybody has any questions out there. If you do have any questions and we don't have time to ask, this is where you can contact me at cruz.salinas@utrgv.edu. Thank you once again. We're open for discussion and questions.
Well, thank you so much, Cruz. Great, valuable information. We have a couple questions here. The first one is, which cultivars have the best flavor and selling potential?
Personally, I preferred the Purple Passion, but that's my personal taste. It had a little sweeter taste than the other ones. At my farm, I'm growing very few crowns of the actual Purple Passion. What I'm growing is the Mary Washington. One thing that I might add, that's a good question, is when you do decide to plant in spears, the availability of the crowns is going to play a big role, and being able to get them. You almost have to go almost a year in advance with your supplier to be able to get some of these plants. Once your order is in, again, Mother Nature plays a big role on you getting your order, because these plants, personally, I got them from Kentucky, and during harvest season, 2 years that I did try to get the plants, they had the real bad rains, they couldn't harvest. So I literally couldn't get the plants that I wanted. I didn't have a choice. I got what they had, and at this point it was Mary Washington, so I stuck with Mary Washington. Mary Washington tastes delicious though, but I sort of kind of like the sweeter taste.
All right, thank you. We have another question about the shelf life. What is the shelf life of the asparagus after harvesting?
Taking care of them, as I mentioned in one of the slides, is the most important thing. If you just cut them and you just lay them in your refrigerator, they're not going to last very long. It's very important that and we ourselves don't even wash them when we harvest. We're very careful when we harvest the plant that we don't get any dirt on them. That way we don't have to rinse them out. And basically we just cut them, and we put them in a container that has about a 1 inch of water in it. And if for us that we're small scale, our glasses are perfect for us. But if you're doing big scale, you would probably have to get a container that you would be able to fit with the actual spears standing upright. And normally what we do is we try not to keep them more than 3-4 days. So we harvest on Monday, sell on Wednesday, and what we harvest on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, we sell on Saturday. And so that's 3 days that they may be at our place or standing in water. But we've had them go up to 7 days and they taste just as good. We've had them go up to 10 days and still taste just as good.
Okay, thank you. Someone here is asking if the PowerPoint is gonna be available for download. Donna, if you type your email, because right now we haven't planned anything for downloading it. We might do it in the future. But if you type your email, we'll make sure that we send you a copy of it. Next question, Cruz. They're asking, where did you get crowns? I get mine from Home Depot. I mean, Tractor Supply, but I don't know if you have any other source.
Yes, Tractor Supply has them available. Their season, when they get them there, I've noticed they're a little late. But I mean, if you want to go a whole year without harvesting, that's fine. And one of the things that I have noticed is their crowns are not quite a year old. They're very, very small crowns. But I mean, if you have the time, if you have the patience, that'll work. Normally you can go Google, buy asparagus crowns. Personally, I get them from Andy's Asparagus in Kentucky. I mean, there's a lot of other places that can supply you with the actual crowns for transplanting. Seeds you can purchase just about anywhere on Amazon. Once again, as far as purchasing crowns, the older the crown, the more expensive it's going to be. I buy the 3, 4, or 5-year-old crowns. That way, as if I plant my crown in March when I receive them, or April, then I will be harvesting from those crowns a year later. And I'm talking real nice edible spears. So as I said earlier, if you go by seeds, you have to wait at least 3 years before you can actually start harvesting, because you got to develop a root system. You got to develop a real nice crown so that you may start harvesting your edible spears. But you can get them online from a lot of other places. As far as price is concerned, it's almost like $1 per year that you're going to pay for a crown. 3-year crown is going to cost you $3. A 5-year crown is going to cost you about $5 plus shipping.
Okay, Cruz, we have quite a few questions. So next one is, can you harvest some and let some go to fern?
Yes, you can. But when you do that, 2 things happen. You won't be able to harvest some of the spears because you won't see them. The actual fern will cover them. It's harder to harvest. But yes, you can harvest. But once the plant goes into fern, it actually stops the actual production of your quantity of spears also. So it's better not to let them go to ferns till you actually at the end of the season.
Okay, next question is about fertilizer. Which fertilizer you recommend for container planting, since it will be washed away with watering? How often would you apply it? And do you apply it equally throughout the year?
At fertilizer, that's a real tricky question. And once you have to determine how much fertilizer is in your soil. But one of the things that we do at our place is we don't apply fertilizer. We actually apply compost, well, which is an organic fertilizer. And once a year, right after the season in spring, I go in and apply a 1 inch thick of compost on top of my raised bed. Okay, it may sound expensive, but it's really not. We buy our compost locally at the McAllen Recycle Center, and basically that is the only fertilizer that is ever applied to my asparagus that I'm growing at our farm, and we're organically growing everything there. We're not certified, but I do not apply any type of fertilizers throughout the year, other than that one time at the end of the first season, and that lasts throughout the entire year.
Okay, which varieties attracted the most pests?
Actually, to be honest with you, as far as where we had the trial and at my house, asparagus doesn't have too many pests. We have never had to spray for any sort of pest, and we've had plenty of pests there on our farm, on our tomatoes and our other vegetables. But I have never applied any type of insect control to the asparagus. That's one big advantage of growing asparagus. Not too many pests out there. I guess I like it. Now, when you're growing at the beginning, on your soil, if you don't have good soil, you may have grub worms. That's one thing you might apply something if you have grub worms that might eat on your root system. But I mean, after that, I've never applied anything for insect control.
All right, thank you. Next question. Do your plants multiply and you can dig up and expand your planting?
Yes, definitely. As the years go by, the crown actually grows bigger and bigger and bigger. So if you want, you could literally dig out the crown. A 5 to 6 year crown is probably going to be, the actual roots will probably reach out, I would say about 18 inches. The base of the crown where the actual spears are coming out of, you can literally grab it and break it and cut it into 4 sections or 2 sections, all depending how big it is. And from that one plant, you could have 4 plants.
Thank you, Cruz. They're saying here, well-drained soil, but alkaline pH is 8.0. I'm assuming that's the situation of Ken. How deep should the amended soil be in order to get max benefit to roots?
That's a tough question. I was very, very fortunate that on my farm we have sandy loam soil. My entire farm, I have 15 acres, and I farm on 2 acres only, and I rent the other 13. I did not have to mess with changing any of that where I grew my asparagus. The asparagus did very, very well from the get-go. I never actually tried to change the soil one way or the other, but I did talk to a gentleman one time, and he said that there are ways that you can change the alkaline and the acidity of the soil, but that I really couldn't say how to do it, but it is possible.
Okay, I think you mentioned this, but they're asking what months are a good time to cut the fern down.
What we do is we cut it in as soon as we know that we're not going to get a freeze in early spring. We're talking maybe February, March. at the latest. And then again in late October, early September, I would say, before that, that we might get a hard freeze when the spears or shall I say the asparagus is in spear stage and not in fern stage. As far as once the freeze comes in, and it freezes the top part, but it doesn't freeze the crown, if that makes any sense. Once again, I might mention that here in the Rio Grande Valley, I was able to plant just 6 inches deep. And that's the reason, because we never get a real hard freeze. We don't have snow in the ground that actually freezes the soil that would actually freeze the crown, if that makes any sense. So the plant will, or in winter, the actual fern will senesce and die, but the root system does not.
Okay, next question. If we happen to get a rare valley freeze, how would the asparagus hold up since they are planted at a shallower depth?
Okay, I just mentioned that a while ago. I've had my asparagus plants at 6 to 8 inches for 7 years now, and fortunately, we haven't had what we call a super hard freeze. But if you've been here long enough, we did get a little bit of snow 2 years ago or a year ago, and we've had some hard freezes, and I have not lost any of my plants due to the weather conditions that we've had here in the Rio Grande Valley for the last 7 years.
Okay, you mentioned cutting early September. When is month or time for second cutting for next growing season?
Yeah, we mentioned that earlier also. It's early spring, and I guess the rule of thumb is be watching when you have your last freeze, and then be watching when you're going to get your first freeze, and go a month forward or a month backward on your cutting. I mean, that's literally a good rule of thumb.
Okay, I'm not sure if you know this, but they're asking if you can pickle asparagus. I don't know if you're
Yes,
besides
you
a farmer
can.
and cook.
Yes, you can. You can pickle asparagus. Sometimes in the market, you will find a white asparagus that's being pickled. The white asparagus is the exact same thing as the green asparagus, tastes the same and everything, other than it's white. And you'll pay probably 5 times more per pound for the white asparagus. It's very, very hard to find fresh asparagus here in the United States. It's mostly harvested in Europe, Germany, and those countries. The reason for that is it takes extra steps to get a white asparagus. And basically what it is you cut your ferns, then you have to build a mound of mulch 8 inches tall. Then you have to cover it with a black plastic so that the actual spear, when it's growing in the mulch. And since the sunlight is not hitting it, it doesn't create photosynthesis. So thus you have a white spear. And as far as the difference is concerned in taste, I tasted the white asparagus, and it tastes no different than the green one.
Okay, someone here asking if the recording will be available to view again. I'm not sure about that. It's the first time that we do this remote training. But we got your email here, Olivet, and as soon as we find out, we will let you know. If it's possible, it will probably be a link so you can see the recording, but we will have to check on that and get back with you. But the PowerPoint presentation, for sure, we're going to send them out to you. For those of you that wanted it, I remind you, please type your email address and we will send you a copy of the PowerPoints. Okay, great training, Cruz, very informational. And they're asking, which month do you fertilize with compost?
When I fertilize, it's right after I cut my ferns in spring. As the day I cut them, I already have the compost available, and as soon as I cut them, I put that 1 inch thick of compost over the cut ferns. And as you're dripping, as it's watering or it's raining, that compost literally works into the soil, and that is my fertilizer for the year.
Okay, well, we have someone here with a hand raised. We're gonna give him access to the mic and see if they have a question. Edna, you still have a question for Cruz?
Actually, no, I went ahead and put them down in the chat. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Okay, looks like those are all the questions, Cruz. Thank you again. Lots of great information. And just as a reminder, next Tuesday, June the 30th at the same time, 10 a.m., we will learn about designing and installing a drip irrigation system. And the following Tuesday, we will cover growing tomatoes and watermelon in South Texas. So we're going to be using the same link, but we will send you a reminder again through social media and through email. So we invite you and we thank you again. You have any last words, Cruz, that you want to say?
Just to mention, on the next week, the drip irrigation system, it might come out that it was designed for high tunnels, but the design is going to be literally for both high tunnels and in-ground drip irrigation systems.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Cruz. Thank you, everybody. And hopefully this presentation was useful for you, for your plants on your gardens or your farms. And we hope to see you again next Tuesday at 10 a.m. Thank you so much.